The high school graduate slacker should be fired ASAP. The CEO probably won't say it outright, so we'll make it clear for him. We don't need high school grads with useless certifications in this company. Tim's words snapped something inside me. Working under this guy, I can't imagine myself thriving at this company. And honestly, after being told directly by my boss that I'm not needed, why would I even hope to stay? Unable to suppress the growing frustration, I decided to respond to Tim on the spot. Well, then, he'll take my leave. I won't be showing up tomorrow, so thanks in advance. As I turned to leave, Tim's laugh echoed behind me. But soon enough, he'll realize the mistake he's made. No matter how much he tries to make amends, we'll never forgive him. Imagining the despair he's bound to face in the future, I packed my belongings and walked out of the company. My name is Kevin Smith. I'm in my 30s, working as an employee at an IT company. Since I work for a well-known company, people assume I must have an impressive background, but that couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, I didn't go to college. I joined this company straight out of high school. So how did someone with no noteworthy qualifications like me land a job at such a prestigious company? It all goes back to something that happened when I was in high school. Although I didn't enjoy studying, I had a keen interest in computers and the internet. And I acquired a level of knowledge far beyond what an average high school student would have. Yet, I couldn't picture myself going to college or getting a traditional job. That's when I started thinking about ways to make money using my skills. And the idea I came up with, hacking into company servers. Looking back, it was an absurdly childish and short-sighted plan, but to my teenage self, it seemed like a ticket to becoming rich. I managed to hack into a company's computer system and sent an email instructing them to deposit $10,000 into a specific account. I nervously waited for the money to arrive, but instead of a deposit, the company's CEO, Mr. Anderson, showed up. I was surprised, he said. You broke into our server and only asked for $10,000. That's unheard of for a hacker, and to think it was a high school student. While I knew how to hack into a server, I didn't have the skills to cover my tracks. It was pathetic how I had fooled myself into thinking making money was that easy just because I had broken into a big company's system. Feigning regret on the outside, I vowed to execute my plans perfectly next time. Maybe Mr. Anderson saw right through me. With a warm smile, he asked, "What are you passionate about? You clearly have a strong interest in IT, given what you've pulled off. What kind of future do you see for yourself?" Caught off guard, I tilted my head and gave it a moment's thought. Then I shared what I honestly felt at that moment. Honestly, I didn't really have any plans. I just want to enjoy life, I guess. Looking back, it was an incredibly cocky answer. But Mr. Anderson didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, his smile grew wider. "I see, Smith, you've got a remarkable talent. Instead of using it to cause trouble, why not use it to help people? You can do that. At least, I believe you can." What was he saying to a kid had just met? Growing up, I'd only ever been scolded by my parents and teachers for playing around on the computer instead of studying. No one had ever praised me before. So it's true his genuine acknowledgement made me start to open up to him. And then he added, "Once you graduate, how about working for my company? Someone with such advanced knowledge is exactly what we need." His offer made up my mind. No one had ever looked at me so earnestly or told me I was needed. Though I'd always known I had more IT knowledge than the average high schooler, I never imagined it could be used to help someone. And to be honest, I couldn't picture myself studying for college entrance exams or job hunting either. So Mr. Anderson's offer was like a dream come true. I didn't give him an immediate answer that day, but he promised to explain everything in detail later. A few days later, he presented the company's midterm plans and vision for the future, passionately explaining how much they needed my skills. But at the time, I didn't understand a word of the business jargon or corporate speak. All I knew was his passion moved me, and I silently vowed to do my best for him. They say it takes a thief to catch a thief. And I suppose hiring someone like me was one way for the company to strengthen its security. Understanding that this was what they expected of me, I resolved to do whatever it took to protect the company's systems. After working for several decades, here I am, frustrated by another annoying problem. I just can't seem to get along with my boss, Tim. "Hey, Smith, get over here. Even a high school grad like you can handle this job." Tim waved me over to his desk with a rough manner, signaling me to come closer. I sighed and reluctantly walked toward him. Whenever Tim called me over, it was rarely for anything good. He treated me like I was incompetent just because I only graduated high school. Had dumped irrelevant tasks and personal errands on me, like running out to buy him things. But I guess that's what being part of a company means. You're expected to keep your boss happy, even if it means sacrificing your time and money. If I could talk to my friends about this, I might have realized how unfair Tim's behavior was. But most of my classmates were in college, so I didn't have anyone to ask. Not knowing much about how a company works, I naively assumed it was just part of a strict, hierarchical culture. When I asked Tim at his desk what he needed, he responded irritably. "What's with that attitude? When you're called, you're supposed to answer loudly and get here quickly." Suppressing my annoyance, I lowered my head and apologized. Satisfied for the moment, he thrust a stack of papers in my face and said, "Read through all of this, summarize the key points, suggest improvements, and prepare a presentation on the future outlook. It's due by the weekend, so make sure it's flawless." With that, Tim grabbed his cigarette and started to walk away. I stopped him to voice my concern. "Do you mean I need to finish all of this in just a few days? I already have other tasks to complete. Could you extend the deadline for one of them?" I was already overwhelmed with my current workload. Adding this to the mix would make it impossible to meet the deadlines. Besides, was summarizing these documents really my job? From what I could tell, this stack of papers dealt with the department's revenue, customer feedback, and future company policies. It didn't make sense for me to handle something like that. It was obvious Tim was just trying to dump his responsibilities on me. Even though he was rarely in the office, always out on cigarette breaks or business meetings, he still found a way to push his work onto me. I tried to bring this up as tactfully as I could, but Tim responded with irritation. "Do you know how humiliating it is for me to let a high school graduate like you handle these materials? This is about giving you experience so I can make corrections later. It's part of your development. Stop complaining and get to work. Saying you don't have enough time just proves you're incompetent." With that, Tim left the office. Whenever he went on break, he wouldn't return for hours. I figured I'd start reading through the documents and ask him questions when he came back, even though I knew he'd respond in a reluctant way. Sighing, I returned to my desk and began planning how to tackle the workload. As I went through the materials, I came up with a few new ideas for improvement. It seemed like the company's declining performance was the reason Tim had been asked to submit improvement proposals. The main cause of customer loss appeared to be the high cancellation rates for the internet services we provided. This could potentially be resolved by addressing server issues, reviewing pricing, and rethinking our sales strategies. Additionally, our company handled maintenance for wireless equipment and base stations in collaboration with government agencies. These processes followed outdated practices, but updating them could improve profit margins. I compiled all of this into a report and prepared to submit it to Tim. By the weekend, I handed the completed report to Tim. Without even glancing at it, he threw it straight into the trash. The content is sloppy, and the presentation is awful. Redo it from scratch so it's eye-catching and easy to understand. How could he say that without even looking at it? I swallowed, the retort rising in my throat. However, if we continue to back down, we will definitely not be able to meet the deadline. And calmly asked for feedback. Understood. They'll rework the presentation. But could you tell me what's wrong with the content? I put a lot of thought into it and would appreciate your input. If the visuals weren't good enough, I could study other materials to improve them. But if the content itself wasn't acceptable, I'd need advice or a different perspective to make it better. Hearing this, Tim let out an exaggerated sigh of annoyance. Then, with a condescending tone, he said, "This is why I can't stand people with low education, just copying what I tell you into a document. What's the point of that? You'll never grow if you don't use your brain." Tim turned on his computer and began fiddling with it. Could he be about to give me some advice? Maybe, despite his harsh words, he really was trying to help his subordinates grow. That's what I wanted to believe, but my hopes were quickly shattered. His screen displayed nothing but entertainment news, completely unrelated to work. Seeing him casually scroll through headlines made me feel deeply disappointed. What are you still standing there for? You were whining about not having enough time. Yet here you are wasting it by doing nothing. Don't even think about charging overtime for this. With those words, Tim waved me off like I was some kind of pest. Clenching my teeth in anger, I returned to my desk. That night, I worked tirelessly, sacrificing sleep to complete the new materials. Ironically, I managed to come up with even more ideas to improve the original proposal. Maybe Tim had pressured me, hoping to push me towards something better. But with the additional workload, my progress on the tasks I was initially assigned suffered. As I busily tried to juggle everything, I was suddenly summoned to the CEO's office. Entering the room, I was greeted by Mr. Anderson's warm smile. "Smith, thank you for coming. I know you're busy, but I have something I'd like to ask of you." Truthfully, I was already overwhelmed, but if it was a request from Mr. Anderson, I'd do whatever it took. Besides, Mr. Anderson was known for his excellent management skills. Unlike him, I was confident he'd consider my workload before assigning me anything. Even before hearing what he had to say, I nodded eagerly. "Of course, whatever you need, I'll give it my all." Hearing my response, Mr. Anderson spoke kindly. "Thank you. This is a task only you can handle, and it's a project that could greatly impact the company's future. I'm assigning subordinates to assist you so you won't have to handle your current task directly. This new work involves collaborations with other companies and the government." I was so shocked I couldn't hide my surprise. Our company, which had primarily focused on internet services and infrastructure, was now expanding into fields related to national defense in collaboration with major corporations. Mr. Anderson said it was only a small role in a larger project, but since it involved national policies, the potential revenue would be significant. The thought of being part of something so big was both daunting and exhilarating. Swallowing hard, I steeled myself and replied, "I understand. I'd be honored to take on the challenge." Hearing my positive response, Mr. Anderson smiled warmly and shook my hand firmly. This was my chance to accomplish something greater. If I succeeded, even Tim would have no choice but to acknowledge my contributions. With those thoughts in mind, I returned to my work. The moment I sat down at my desk, Tim called me over. Having just had an uplifting conversation with Mr. Anderson, the prospect of dealing with Tim again felt like a heavy weight. But of course, I couldn't ignore my boss' summons. I responded loudly and made my way to his desk. "I saw you went to the CEO's office earlier. What was that about?" It seemed Tim was curious about why I had left my desk to meet with Mr. Anderson. Knowing how obsessed Tim was with promotions, the idea of a high school graduate like me getting special attention from the CEO must be rubbed him the wrong way. While the new project was mostly decided, I still didn't know the details or specifics of the work. Carefully choosing my words, I explained the situation to Tim. We discussed my current progress and the company's future direction. "Since you've mentioned my poor planning before, perhaps that's why Mr. Anderson was concerned." Hearing this, Tim nodded as if satisfied. Then, with a sinister grin, he said, "Let me make it clear, so you don't get any ideas. High school graduate freeloaders like you should be fired ASAP." The CEO probably doesn't want to say it outright, so we'll say it for him. "We don't need people with useless qualifications like yours in this company." Tim's words snapped something inside me. I couldn't see myself thriving in this company under someone like him. Even if I got involved in the new project, I was sure Tim would find ways to undermine my work. And most importantly, being told I wasn't needed by my direct supervisor was the last straw. There was no way I wanted to stay in a company where I was treated like this. Reaching the limit of my patience, I responded to Tim right then and there. "Well, we'll be leaving now. I won't be coming in tomorrow, so take care." As I turned to walk away, Tim laughed and said, "Just like a high school graduate, no backbone at all. Losing someone like you will only help the company." I was sure that one day he'd realize his mistake. No matter how much he tried to change his attitude, I wasn't planning to forgive him. Imagining the despair that awaited him, I packed my belongings and left the company. The next morning, I had no intention of going to work, so I didn't bother waking up early. I planned to sleep in until almost noon, but my phone kept ringing incessantly. I knew it was Tim calling, so I ignored it, but the endless notifications became too annoying. I finally picked up the call, and Tim's frantic voice came through. "Hey, where are you right now? I need to talk to you, so come to the office right now." Despite his urgency, my decision to quit had been based on what he said the day before. He was no longer my boss. With a blunt tone, I replied, "Didn't you tell me yesterday to quit because I'm just a salary thief?" "You were right, I'm still a high school graduate, so I'm following through with my former boss' request." In truth, Tim had wanted me to quit. But now, he sounded flustered. "No, that was just a joke. Anyway, I need you to come to the office right away. I have something important to discuss, and Mr. Anderson is waiting for you too. Please, hurry." I had no intention of returning just because of Tim's plea, but hearing Mr. Anderson's name made it hard to ignore. After all, I owed my career at the company to Mr. Anderson. I hadn't even had the chance to properly thank him. At the very least, I felt I should tell him my faults directly. With that in mind, I agreed to meet and hung up the phone. When I arrived at the office, I was escorted to a meeting room. As expected, both Tim and Mr. Anderson were there. Ignoring Tim, I spoke to Mr. Anderson. "I'm sorry for quitting so suddenly. I am truly grateful to you, Mr. Anderson, but I can't work under someone like Tim, so I've decided to leave." Mr. Anderson said nothing, listening intently with a serious expression. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Tim cut him off. "There's no need for you to quit, right? The company needs your skills. I want you to stay and continue contributing here." He spoke as if yesterday's incident hadn't happened, but the reason I quit was entirely because of Tim. Deliberately, I explained my reasons in front of Mr. Anderson. I had always planned to work here long term, but I can't continue under Tim's leadership, even if I were to transfer departments. I have no desire to stay in a company that allows a manager to treat their subordinates this way. If I only thought about myself, having Tim transferred would solve the problem, but that wouldn't fix the underlying issue. Had likely continue sabotaging other new hires or employees with lower educational backgrounds. That was something I couldn't tolerate. However, Tim, unable to grasp my reasoning, continued with his misguided remarks. What's so bad about this? You're a high school graduate, yet this company offers you such great benefits. You should be grateful and stop being so stubborn. As I prepared to counter his argument, Mr. Anderson spoke up. Tim, your recent report was excellent, but your communication with your subordinates is entirely wrong. You need to reevaluate the basics of how you interact with people. Hearing this, Tim's expression became complicated. Being praised for his report while simultaneously criticized for his behavior left him unsure how to respond. It was only natural. After all, the report he had been praised for was actually my work. In truth, Tim had no part in its success. I decided to reveal this fact in front of Mr. Anderson. Are you referring to the recent report? That was something Tim made me create. He acted as if it were his own achievement, but he forced me to do it under flimsy pretexts. Hearing this, even the usually calm and kind Mr. Anderson looked visibly displeased. Tim panicked and began trying to justify himself. No, that's not true. I had you create a rough draft for training purposes, but it was completely unusable. Of course, I made the actual document myself. Stop spouting nonsense, especially when you are just a useless high school graduate. It was laughable that Tim, who had tossed my report into the trash without even looking at it, was now claiming to care about employee development. If he really didn't use the report I created, I'd love to see how he supposedly improved it. As I was about to retort, Tim looked at me with disdain and said, "You're useless to this company. Mr. Anderson is just being polite by trying to keep you here. There are plenty of other employees who can replace you." It was precisely this kind of attitude that made me not want to stay in this company. While Tim seemed satisfied with himself, Mr. Anderson spoke firmly. If he leaves, we're looking at a $3 billion loss. Are you ready to take responsibility for that? Mr. Anderson's anger was evident, but Tim, still oblivious, responded with a clueless remark. What? Wouldn't that save on personnel costs and turn into a $3 million profit instead? Shaking his head, Mr. Anderson explained. We're barely staying in the black right now. If Smith leaves, we'll need to hire a new cybersecurity specialist. Also, we're expanding into defense-related projects, and without him, that's not going to happen. At a minimum, we'd be looking at a $3 billion loss. Tim seemed to think that my job was something anyone could do, but in reality, cybersecurity work is incredibly complex. As someone skilled in hacking, I've been improving the company's systems since I joined. Maintaining those systems would be nearly impossible for anyone else. Finding someone with similar expertise would be incredibly difficult. On top of that, my qualifications likely play a role in our defense-related work. One of my certifications, the first-class Land Special Radio Technician, was held by only 7 people in the state at the time I obtained it. Additionally, I have a full suite of certifications proving my ID expertise. A professional with skills in defense, hacking, and ID is highly valuable. When Mr. Anderson explained all this, Tim's face turned pale as he looked at me. It seemed he had finally realized the gravity of his actions. He opened his mouth to say something but couldn't find the words. I greeted Mr. Anderson and left the room. I was sure Mr. Anderson understood my unwavering decision. He nodded at me as if to say, "Good luck," without trying to persuade me to stay. In the months following my resignation, a major incident occurred at my former company. The company suffered a massive hacking attack, resulting in the leak of customer and company confidential information. It appeared to be the work of an overseas organization, which sent a message demanding $10 billion to restore the system. When I heard about it, I contacted Mr. Anderson to see if there was anything I could do, but it was already too late. As I learned more details, I was shocked to discover something even more surprising. The source of the password and customer data leak was none other than Tim. He had carelessly opened an email with an obvious virus and entered sensitive information like passwords and IDs without hesitation. Someone in his position, responsible for guiding subordinates, had made such a basic mistake. Tim's responsibility in this matter was enormous. And yet, while the rest of the employees were working tirelessly to restore the system and plan future measures, Tim had been skipping work without notice, effectively disappearing. I could understand his embarrassment after such a colossal failure. But I wished he would own up to his mistake and handle it responsibly. As for me, I started working as an independent contractor after leaving the company. It's been 5 years now, and I've been able to maintain a stable income. Tim used to mock me endlessly for being a high school graduate, but IT skills are in high demand. Thankfully, I'm now earning more than I did as an employee. In the end, it's less about how much you studied and more about honing your strengths, developing your skills, and building strong relationships with others. From here, I plan to start my own company and take on even bigger challenges. No matter how successful I become or what social standing I achieve, they'll never look down on others based on their educational background or past achievements. With that vow in mind, I dedicate myself to my work today as always.